Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you send us, dig in, and pull out the key insights, the goal, to get you up to speed without feeling totally overloaded.
And you've given us a really fascinating collection this time. It's quite a mix.
Yeah, definitely. We've got personal stories, sociological takes, even legal and political stuff, all touching on sex and sexuality today.
Right. So our mission here is to, navigate all these different viewpoints, find those surprising facts, and really get a handle on the big conversations shaping things right now.
Sounds good. So where do we start?
Well, one of the sources kicks off with an editor's foreword that sets the stage nicely. It talks about how discussions around sex, especially in the U.S., are kind of happening on multiple levels at once. Did that resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. The editor really highlights the internet's role, doesn't it? How it's just exploded the number of sexual communities out there.
Exactly. And broadened the range of erotic choices people have.
Which, of course, completely changes how people, especially younger people, figure themselves out and, form relationships. The whole landscape feels like it's constantly shifting.
That's a great way to put it. The digital world really has opened up new ways to connect and explore that just didn't exist before.
Uh-huh.
And that leads us into Lori Selk's open letter, Dear John. It gives us a peek inside the leather community.
Right. And for listeners who might not know, the leather community often involves BDSM practices, bondage, disciplines, sadism, masochism, usually done consensually.
Yes, very intentionally. So what was your main takeaway from Lori's letter?
Well, what really struck me was her frustration. She's seeing judgments within her own community, specifically criticisms based on ideas from queerness and feminism, which she sees as inseparable from her leather identity.
Yeah, she feels those three things, kink, queerness, feminism, are deeply connected for her. And her core point is about social justice.
Right. She argues that for any consensual relationship to be truly ethical, the people involved need to come from a place of roughly equal societal power.
Exactly. It's like a baseline requirement for her. Otherwise, she worries these communities might just end up reinforcing the same old inequalities.
And she feels the common perception of kink and leather totally misses that. People jump to the whips and chains stereotype, but she's saying, no, it's much deeper. It's tied to these ideals of social justice within the community itself.
Which is a really interesting challenge to how it's often seen from the outside, highlighting that internal ethical core.
Definitely. Okay, so switching gears quite a bit. We have Connor Habib's Rest Stop Confidential. This one explores anonymous sex between men at public rest stops. What stood out there?
I think the most surprising thing, honestly, is that this is still happening regularly, even with Grindr and all the apps.
I know. You'd kind of think technology would have made that obsolete.
Right. But Habib suggests these encounters offer something unique. Maybe for men who are questioning or need to keep things hidden. These places provide a space without labels, without the need to define yourself in the way you might on an app.
It's sort of a paradox, isn't it? A public yet anonymous space offering this specific kind of freedom.
Exactly. And speaking of shifting identities, that brings us to Seth Fisher's Notes from a Unicorn about bisexuality.
Ah, yes, the complexities of being bi. What were his key points?
Well, Fisher really gets into how limiting those binary labels, gay or straight, can feel. He shares this really personal story.
The orgasm anecdote.
Yeah, about struggling to orgasm when he was actively trying to be gay, to fit into that identity. His body just wasn't cooperating with the label he was trying on.
It's so powerful because it just nails the involuntary nature of attraction, doesn't it? You can't just decide who you're attracted to no matter how hard you try to fit a mold.
Precisely. It shows that internal conflict, when your experience doesn't neatly match the boxes available.
So, taking those few pieces together, what's the big picture on identity?
I think it really underscores the fluidity, the complexity of it all. These stories show how hard it is to slap rigid labels onto something as personal and dynamic as desire and community.
Okay, theme 2. Shifting views on sexual practices and technology. We've got Andy Isaacson's piece on vibrators. Can a better vibrator inspire an age of great American sex? Starts with a history, right?
It does, and it's a bit of a tangled history. Isaacson mentions Rachel Main's theory about doctors using early devices for hysteria.
The pelvic massage thing.
Right, but then historian Helen King pushes back a bit. She says, well, abdominal massage was common for women's issues, but clear proof of genital massage for medical reasons back then is fuzzier. It gets clearer later, like with Galen.
So it's not quite the simple story we sometimes hear. It's debated.
Exactly, more nuanced. But then Isaacson contrasts that whole historical view with modern companies like Jimmy Jane.
Ethan and Bowden's company, what's their angle?
It's all about destigmatization, using high-quality materials, focusing on design, making sex toys that aren't just functional but also, well, beautiful, things you wouldn't feel weird about owning.
Right, moving them out of the sort of seedy back rooms and into the mainstream like any other well-designed gadget.
That's the idea, and they've had some success. The Form 6 vibrator won a design award, showed up in museum design stores.
That definitely signals a shift, doesn't it? Perception is changing, no longer just hidden away.
Totally. It speaks to a broader normalization of talking about sexual pleasure, especially female pleasure, moving away from shame, which ties into another shift, polyamory.
Ah, yeah, Rachel Swan's Sex by Numbers. Polyamory being, well, having multiple romantic relationships, openly and consensually.
Correct. And the article introduces us to Jessica. She read The Ethical Slut in college and actively chose this path.
Seeking a more cooperative, communal approach instead of traditional monogamy.
And the piece suggests this isn't just her. It's a growing trend. Polyamory is becoming more visible, more discussed, maybe even more accepted in some circles.
Especially places like the Bay Area, it seems, which has that history of embracing alternatives. Dan Savage's name comes up too.
Right, he's talked about it quite a bit.
Yeah.
But the article is realistic too. It points out the challenges.
Oh, for sure. Jealousy is a big one. Savage himself sounds pretty skeptical about ever fully getting rid of that.
And then there's potential for dishonesty, which can happen anywhere, really. Plus just the sheer weight of society being so geared towards monogamy.
So the ideal of ethical non-monogamy versus the often messy reality.
Exactly. Even with more acceptance, people in poly relationships often still deal with judgment and just not having clear social maps for it all.
Okay, let's move to our third theme, sex and relationships across the lifespan. We start with Alex Morris's Very Legal, Sex and Love and Retirement. This was set in Flushing House, a retirement community. What surprised you here?
Just how much those fundamental human drives, dating, attraction, relationship drama, continue right into old age. It doesn't just stop.
Yeah, the residents are actively dating, connecting, breaking up, just like anyone else, but with maybe different factors in play.
Definitely. The article mentions Sally and Al's on-off thing, and the practicalities are health issues are real. People are dealing with the loss of past partners. There's this sense of limited time.
Distilled dating, the article called it.
Yeah, like some of the pressures of younger life careers, kids fall away. And it becomes more about companionship, shared interests, emotional support.
Though it sounds like there are unique challenges too, like blending families late in life or dealing with the ghosts of long marriages.
Absolutely. Now, as a stark contrast, we have Kristen Himmon's Lost Boys, a really tough piece about underage male sex work. What were the key findings?
I think the most crucial and maybe unexpected point was that many of these boys aren't controlled by pimps in the classic sense.
Right. That really cuts against the common stereotype. It suggests the reasons are often more complex. Homelessness, abuse, maybe just no safe place to live.
And that often gets missed, right? The focus tends to be on girls and the pimp narrative. Hinman points out a real lack of resources specifically for boys or trans youth in this situation.
Yeah, there's a huge gap. The article really argues for needing more than just rescue operations. We need to tackle the root causes, housing, support, mental health care, job skills, things tailored to their specific, often traumatic experiences.
The existing systems often just aren't set up for it.
Sadly, no.
Okay, theme 4, the intersection of sex, culture, and politics. First up, John Pressick's piece on Tim Tebow's virginity from Holy Fuck, the fourth and long virgin. How did Tebow clash with the typical athlete image?
Massively. Tebow was very public about waiting for marriage, which is just the polar opposite of the hypersexualized virile image often projected onto male athletes.
There's that expectation of constant sexual conquest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dr. Don Sabo's research has mentioned about how locker room culture can actually train athletes to compete sexually, sometimes leading to a disconnect from commitment.
So Tebow was a real anomaly in that culture. And while his faith was central, the article implies it was his deviation from the norm that drew so much intense focus and, frankly, criticism.
Precisely. As a high-profile athlete openly talking about abstinence, he directly challenged those cultural scripts.
Okay, then we have Rob Boston's Christian Conservatives versus Sex. This dives into the long-running battles over birth control access in the U.S. What's the background there?
Boston walks us through the history, mentioning key court cases like Griswold v. Connecticut back in '65.
The one establishing the right to privacy regarding contraception.
Right. But conservative religious groups have consistently fought against that,
Yeah.
and they're still actively trying to limit access.
And one current strategy is using religious freedom arguments.
Yes. The concern highlighted is that these arguments could let employers, for instance, deny contraception coverage in health plans based on their own religious objections.
Which could create huge barriers for employees needing access. It makes personal healthcare decisions dependent on an employer's beliefs.
It really intertwines personal health with these big political and religious fights. Shifting scenes again, Dennis Romero's Porn Defends the Money Shot looks at the porn industry's current struggles. What are they up against?
Well, the biggest thing is probably the flood of free porn online. It's hammered the traditional industry's business model.
Yeah, which apparently means performers are often earning less. And the article connects this pressure to some performers turning to escorting or other offset sex work to make ends meet.
Which raises major health concerns, especially around condom use. The established industry in LA has testing protocols, but those might not apply offset.
Right. And groups like the AIDS Healthcare Foundation are pushing hard for mandatory condoms on all sets, but the industry's been resisting, citing things like artistic freedom, believe it or not.
It's a really tangled web: economics, worker safety, public health.
Definitely. And finally, in this theme, Melissa Jira grants happy hookers. She's questioning the myths around sex work. What's her main point?
Grant pushes back against seeing the happy hooker as either totally fake or the whole truth. She argues sex work isn't this separate, hidden thing, but is actually deeply tied into our regular economy and social structures.
Like citing Viviera Hollander, historical figures, arguing it's always been part of the economic landscape.
Exactly. And she suggests maybe the societal freakout about it comes from a discomfort with seeing it as actual labor within our system.
Yeah, it forces uncomfortable questions about work, value, and the moral judgments we tend to make.
Okay, final theme. Personal journeys, individual explorations of the erotic. We start with Julia Serrano's cherry picking. She reflects on her experience as a trans woman. What insights does she offer?
Serrano talks about a series of first times related to her transition, her sexuality, her desires. And her point is that sexual evolution isn't just one moment, like surgery or a first encounter. It's ongoing. Each first gives her a new perspective on herself.
It's a great reminder that identity, sexuality, they're fluid, personal journeys, not destinations. Then there's Rachel Kramer Bussel's Baby Talk, a surprising dive into age play and BDSM for her.
Very surprising for her, it seems. Bussel usually leans towards more, let's say, conventional BDSM roles, but engaging in age play where her partner played a baby unexpectedly brought up these really genuine feelings of caretaking and tenderness in her.
Wow. So it completely challenged her assumptions about that kind of play.
Exactly. It shows how stepping outside your usual script can unlock unexpected emotions, blurring lines between power and intimacy.
Then Insia Ansari's Sex by Any Other Name gives us a perspective on navigating sexuality within a Muslim context.
Yes, Ansari writes about the cultural and religious expectation of waiting for marriage for sex, while still acknowledging her own desires and attractions. It's about that negotiation.
Between faith, culture, and personal feeling.
Precisely. It highlights how much those frameworks shape how we experience and express sexuality.
And then we get deeper into BDSM with Patrick Calafia's Enhancing Masochism and Madison Young's Submissive, a personal manifesto. What are the key ideas there?
Calafia really argues against pathologizing masochism, classifying it as a disorder. He emphasizes consent, safety, the whole set and setting idea, and that people are motivated by many different things when engaging with pain erotically.
It's not just one thing.
Not at all. And Jung offers this powerful take on submission, not as weakness, but as a conscious choice, a deep surrender of ego that can be incredibly erotic and foster intense connection.
So both pieces really show the complexity, the communication, the trust involved in BDSM. It's far beyond simple stereotypes.
Absolutely. And lastly, we have Carol Queen's Ghosts, All My Men Are Dead, a really moving reflection on the AIDS epidemic in San Francisco's queer community.
Such a powerful piece. What themes does she explore?
It's heavy with love, immense loss, but also resilience. How the community navigated that horror, how sexual expression itself evolved in the face of such tragedy. It's about connection enduring through devastation.
It really drives home how tied sexuality is to life, community, history, everything. So, looking back at all these personal stories, What's the common thread?
I think it's just the sheer individuality and diversity of it all. How personal erotic exploration is, how varied human desires are, and how we're all constantly figuring out our own sexuality within this incredibly complex web of social forces and personal feelings.
This has been quite a journey through these sources. It definitely paints a picture of sexual culture that's way more complex and, frankly, more interesting than the usual mainstream narrative.
Absolutely. If you look across all the pieces, you see these recurring threads, right? Consent is baseline, non-negotiable. Identity is fluid and constantly being negotiated, both individually and in groups.
Uh-huh. Community plays a huge role in shaping things.
A massive role. And ultimately, it's all about navigating personal desire within all these different contexts, social, cultural, political, personal.
So thinking about everything we've touched on, from online communities and rest stops to retirement homes, political battles, and very personal erotic paths, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How might your own understanding of sex, relationships, or community be shifting after hearing all this?
Yeah. What new questions does this deep dive leave you with? And where might you want to explore next in this huge, constantly changing landscape of human sexuality?